Ronald Weasley was a lonely kid with lots of self-esteem issues that came from having so many older siblings that have each outshined themselves. All of them made it to Gryffindor, became perfects before attaining the head boy position. Each sibling made it on the Hogwarts Quidditch team. And to top it all off, they had all produced excellent grades during their time as Hogwarts students. It was difficult having to grow up underneath all of those expectations that he would someday be like his brother Bill or his other older brother Charlie. Not to mention the fact that his whole family lived in a barely held together home with 0 to no gallons to their name. He saw how some of the other kids his age would always be dressed in clothing that wasn't handed down and often had toys that were supposed to be really expensive. He felt inferior whenever he saw someone like that, and because of it he hardly had any friends amongst the pure bloods of his generation, much less his own neighborhood. The weird Lovegood girl didn't count since she only hung out with him because of his little sister who his mother constantly favored. So many things just began to build up, and it was too much for poor Ronald to handle all at once. So he decided if he couldn't be rich or have any real friends, then he could simply just imagine one that was just like that. Except he would be amazing, loyal, smart, and best of all, he would be someone that he could consider an equal, someone like the older brother he never had compared to Bill, Charlie, Percy, Fred, and George. Thus the creation of Edward Darrow. He had come up with the name from one of his many times grandfather's name from his mother's side of the family, while the last name Darrow came from one of his favorite story tales that his mum always read for him when he couldn't sleep at night. Of course, this led to him being more isolated and by himself, with only Edward being his only company. His mum had noticed that he was always practically alone with little to no friends and tried to make some of the other neighborhood kids be friends for him, but that ended up a total failure. He looks kind of freaky, and what's with those bags underneath his eyes? One of the kids whispered to one another, looking at the sitting form of Ronald Weasley, whose gaze wasn't even paying a single bit of attention to them, but rather at his right, where Edward was. Edward had messy red hair that was a shade deeper than any of the other Weasley, brown eyes that often glinted. Lastly, he wore a fine white suit that matched with his red shirt, and expensive brown-colored shoes. He glared at the group of kids. "Why is it that you keep letting them say such awful crap to you like that, Ron?" Edward asks as Ron sighed. "Because then I would get in trouble with Mum, you know this, Ed. I mean, I wish I could just beat the ever-living shite out of them and tell them to just bugger off," he replies back in a wistful tone. "Besides, who cares about them? I've got you now, Ed, you know and understand me better than any of those other kids." Ron continued, causing Edward to let out a slight smirk. "Yeah, you're right, mate. But still, if they end being a problem, you know I can take care of them, right?" he offered, causing Ron to smile. You see, a while back, one of the neighborhood kids, Thomas, used to bully Ron a lot, sometimes with his words, but more often than not he would beat him up and usually stole the food that his mum would pack for him whenever he would go play outside. Flashback. Thomas kicked Ron in the stomach, causing him to fall down on the dirty ground with a muffled groan. "Learn your place, Weasel. Trash like you belongs on the ground beneath me," he chuckles, searching through his pockets. Ron's fists clenched. He was just so furious. This was like the 10th time this week that Thomas had not only beaten him up, but was now stealing what little he had. "What say I teach him a lesson, Ronnie, my boy?" Edward finally spoke with clear anger hidden behind his calm voice. He was just done with this kid always picking on Ron. His sight began to turn dark, and the last thing he said to him was, "Do it, Ed." With those words, Edward had fully taken over. Slowly, he rose back up onto his feet. "Well, you bloody cunt, where the hell are you going?" "This isn't over, you overgrown fat piece of dog shite," he exclaims, causing Thomas to pause. "The hell did you just call me, Weasel?" he said, causing him to smirk. "You heard what I said, unless you need a new pair of ears," Edward replied as Thomas grew red with fury. "You little shite, I was going easy on you today, but you're asking for it now." With a charge, Thomas ran at him. Edward calmly sidestepped and tripped him. He fell on the ground hard on his ass. Thomas tried to get back up, but Edward slammed his right foot on top of his chest, causing the boy to hit the ground again with a pained cry. He repeats this again, again and again before he knelt down, punching Thomas's face till the point where his face started to bleed everywhere. Lifting him up by the neck of his shirt, Edward gets in close to his face. "If you ever try to even steal from me again, or even try to attack me, I'll fucking kill you. Is that understood?" He said in a calm voice, yet Thomas could feel the implied threat behind his tone. He shakily nodded. "Why, yes, okay. I won't, I promise I won't. Please just don't kill me," he cried. "Good, now here's what you're going to say about your injury." And with that, Edward carefully instructed the other boy on what to say when he went back home to his parents. Thomas nodded through it all and slowly limped away, but Edward called out to him one last time. "Oh, and Thomas, if I ever find you snitch, consider yourself dead," he said, with his eyes gaining a slight malicious glint in them, causing Thomas to pale. "All right, of course I won't, I promise," he stuttered out. With his threat given, Edward calmly watched as he limped away with a smile of satisfaction. Flashback end. "It was pretty fucking diabolical. I tell you, Ron, you should have seen him when I made that threat. The damn oaf looked like he shat himself," Edward reminisced with a chuckle. Ron shook his head. "You did much more than that, Ed. You actually managed to scare him so bad that he and his family had to move away," he replied. Edward shrugged. "Unfortunate, really. He was a pretty good minion to have around when we needed him for our little business," he replied. The Weasley bloodline used to be a rich family like many of the other purebloods, but later on lost all of their wealth and status when one of their ancestors had offended a more ancient bloodline. Long story short, there was a duel. The Weasleys lost everything and were declared blood traitors by some of the more darker families. In order to gather a bit of money for themselves, Edward came up with the plan that they save up on all the wizarding candy that Ronald's mom and dad would buy for him, since it wasn't that expensive, and resell them for a slightly higher price to the Muggles. Of course, they couldn't use the Muggle money for anything in the wizarding world, but Ron had asked his dad if Gringotts could theoretically convert Muggle money into wizarding currency, and as it turned out, they did in fact offer such services. So Edward had suggested they save up half of the money they make from the sellings to convert into wizarding currency, while the other half should be saved up because they wanted to move their life into the Muggle world instead of looking for a career in the wizarding world. Ronald had long since understood that no matter how hard his father worked at the ministry, their family would never be able to earn enough to live a normal life. Not when most of the wizarding world of Britain discriminated against their family. Both his elder brothers Charlie and Bill worked as a curse breaker and dragon caretaker respectively. Yet the amount of money they earned for themselves was only slightly above average, to the point where they could only afford a small Muggle apartment for themselves. Ron faintly remembers what Edward had once told him one day after his father came back and promptly collapsed on the couch from overworking himself. "The working man is a sucker, Ronnie. He's a sucker. The system is always rigged against people like your dad. They work hard every day, and for what? Just to make a few extra nuts while others earn a lot more because of his efforts." It was then Ron had decided that he and Edward would move into the Muggle world once they were all grown up. They'd still keep contact in the wizarding world since most of his family would still be here, but otherwise the Muggle world seemed like the best option. He had wondered how Edward knew all of this. Through research and observation, he had replied, much to his distaste. Ron really hated having to do reading or anything related to it, rather preferring to play games like chess or playing Quidditch with his brothers. Though Edward was quick to smack some sense into him. "If you keep lazing around, how will you reach our dream of ever leaving this place? Come on, Ronald, you've got talent and potential that shouldn't be wasted on silly games. Focus on studying what you have here, go outside more often, see what's around you besides the garden, and who knows, maybe you'll make another friend besides me." Of course, Edward had promptly retracted that last part when most of the close-by neighborhood kids made fun of him because of the way he was dressed in his hand-me-down clothes that his mom had fixed up using Charlie's and Bill's old clothing. For now, it was just the two of them until they made it to Hogwarts, although Ron held no hope of ever making any real friends there. Perhaps partners for his own business plans, but other than that, nope. We should probably go back home now. Mom said to come back once it started turning dark, Ron said, standing up from the ground with Edward following close by.